The more you repeat, the more it becomes powerful. Ha, ha, ha. Guilty, 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 guilty. This is what sealed the deal for him, I think, when he was smart enough to know that comparing the alibi, comparing the timeline to a script, and making the jurors understand that a script has three acts, and the first and the second were written by Michelle Troconis and by Fotis Doulos. And now it's up to them to come up with the third act. What is the third act? Don't leave it up to her, the defendant. He points to her again. She's the one that you will not allow to write the third act. Making that analogy between the alibi and the script was one of the smartest moves. And I think when he said that, I knew that she was going to be convicted. She was going to be found guilty. I didn't know she was going to be found guilty on all charges, but I knew she was going to be found guilty. But he's so smart to make that comparison. That's where acting comes into every profession. Every professional who's good in his profession, as this gentleman, his name is Sean McGuinnness, this prosecutor, knows the power of mentioning script, act, 1, 2, 3. People love movies. People love theatrical experiences, performances. They will relate to that. I thought it was the perfect ending to a perfect monologue, in his case, closing argument. Another thing that I wanted to say is that during the whole trial, Michelle Troconis had her glasses on, and every time she would not need the glasses to look on her computer, she would take them from her face and she would place them on her head. She would move back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If you do the same gesture so many times, it becomes so annoying to the jurors. If I am putting myself in the shoes of the character who takes the glasses from the face and putting it on my hair, that lets me know that it has a little bit to do with vanity. If I'm wearing prescription glasses, which I am putting on these computer adjusted dark glasses because I want to look better for you guys when I do these episodes. So I put them on because my prescription glasses don't make me look as nice. In her case, she was only using those glasses when she was having to pay attention to something that's close up, but whenever she wasn't looking at her computer, she wasn't needing them, she would take them and she would place them on her hair so her face would look nice and she would look better without the glasses. That's how I understand characters from an acting experience, from an acting perspective. Proof how acting is such a strong craft, not just for actors, but for anybody who wants to be able to tell stories in a way that would relate details, specific observations in public speaking, in trials, in any sort of scenario that you can imagine. There was another thing that was talked about when it came to her language and the fact that she doesn't understand because English is not her first language. And I was watching some other person on YouTube and she was saying, well, I can see she doesn't understand English because when she was interviewed in the 3 interviews by the detectives, she has this in between her trying to respond because she had to have a time of thinking to translate from her language into English. The that we all do has nothing to do with language. It has to do with us people. No matter what language we speak as our primary language, we take those pauses and we make sounds like while we're trying to come up with the next thought because we're afraid to stay in the pause. We're afraid to just admit that we're thinking because we think we're not enough or sufficient and we have to rush ourselves to answer questions. We don't want people waiting for our answers. I even tell actors, watch when you're in between lines, you go, ooh, that will say something about you not feeling confident enough to absorb the pause and allow yourself the thinking time that you need before you go to the next line. That has nothing to do with speaking English as the second language. Hello, everyone. This is Mihaela with Art of Experiencing. I am going to analyze the closing arguments in the case of Michelle Troconis, who was found guilty, 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 guilty. And why I believe, on top of all the documents and on top of all the evidence the prosecution presented, what I believe sealed the case and she was found guilty. And it has to do with acting. As you know, my channel is always about my understanding, my interpretation, my perspective on people as if they were characters. This is a tragedy. I'm only going to focus on the closing argument of one of the prosecutor in this case, riveting way, as a great actor would do if this were a fictional story. I thought that he made the audience feel like they were smart in the way that he was directing his words, his understanding, his passion for this case to be solved and for justice to be served. He was looking at the jurors as if they were an audience. I don't know if he made a conscious decision, a subconscious decision, the way that he was presenting his closing argument, but I feel that it was an acting greatly moment for him. Here we go.
Last night, when I was thinking about what I was going to say to you this morning, it occurred to me what this case is really about. It is about a mother's worst nightmare. It is about a mother being taken away from her children in life or in death. It is about Petros, Theodore, Christiane, Constantine, and Noel, who went to bed on May 24th, not knowing where their mother was, and she has still not arrived. That's what this case is about. And so the question becomes, who is responsible for Jennifer Doulos' death? Now, the defense in their closing argument suggested a couple of different things to you. On the one hand, they said it's likely that she's dead, thus leaving the possibility open that she's still alive. Do any of you really believe that? The other possibility is that Fotis Doulos is this monstrous murderer, and still a third possibility that Fotis Doulos wasn't responsible, but Jennifer Doulos is dead nonetheless. But what you didn't hear a lot about in the closing argument from the defense was about Hartford Run and the dump of the evidence. You didn't hear much about that. Very tangentially, they addressed it. I pose this question to you. Do any of you doubt that Fotis Doulos is responsible for the death of his wife?
The beginning was so personal. The fact that he's taking time to come up with the ideas in the moment rather than reading off of a page that he had written everything down, rather than just looking down at his writings. He's making the attempt to connect with the jurors, which in this case, they would be the audience. That's one of the tools of acting. You have to make direct contact. If you're not creating a personal space or a private space where you don't have to look at the audience. Again, remember that I'm calling the jurors the audience in this description of mine, in this interpretation of mine. If you're not looking down because you have a justification to look down, creating a private moment for yourself, that means that you're not paying attention to the audience, you're not paying attention to the camera. The private moment is you're living an inner moment for yourself, an inner moment to come up with something that you're going to say next. That pause, allowing yourself to be in that private moment, is very powerful to the audience. They can see that you haven't prepared the script. They can see that you haven't learned the role. The actor learns the role. The character doesn't. Characters are people. The second thing that he does brilliantly, which is also an acting technique, and it works greatly. It inspires people when they go to watch movies. It makes them identify with the actor, is that he is making it personal from the very beginning. He starts by saying, this case is not about Michelle Troconis, who is on trial for conspiring with Fotis Doulos, the husband of Jennifer Doulos, who's been missing since 2019. He goes into the personal. He calls this trial to be about a mother. Who doesn't identify with the word a mother? Even I, who is not a mother, I can still identify with that because I have a mother. I know how I care about my mother. When I have to play a mother on the stage, when I'm working at the actor studio and I'm choosing some scene to work on or a moment from a character, I'm trying to figure out if the character is a mother, but I'm not a mother, I can identify with being a mother because I will use the inner child, I will use the child in myself as I remember myself to be in my childhood. I'll take a picture of myself at the age of 5 or 6 or 4. I will work on that and try to really implement my senses to have the possibility by use of imagination and sensory work to create the younger version of myself and to try to hold that little child, that little baby that I was once into my arms, whisper to her the things that she needed to hear, and other people, the adults, might not have known that I needed, she needed, the younger version of myself needed. So I can still create that understanding of a mother, of what it means to have a child. Not necessarily do I have to have children. That's how acting is done. This lawyer is so smart. I'm going to find out his name. I don't know his name right now, but it doesn't matter because I'm not doing this analysis of this true crime. There's so many YouTubers who are doing it perfectly, wonderfully, with all the data, with all the names, with all the facts. I'm doing it from an acting perspective and understanding. Makes it personal. Shows even the photograph of the mother with this beautiful smile on. Gorgeous woman, by the way. Gorgeous, gorgeous. With these beautiful 5 children. Not only does it say the mother, it says the mother, and then he goes through all the names of the children. Such a personal relation with him, the lawyer, and what this case means to him. Not only is he a distant lawyer, a prosecutor who has to do his job, he knows all of the children's names. The names are not easy to pronounce. He went to memorize those names. That shows that he is doing the work. He's doing the behind the scenes work of the lawyer. Do you know how many times somebody will come to me and will mispronounce my name? It doesn't matter that person is a nice human being. It doesn't matter that the conversation goes afterwards to be a great conversation. When the name is not pronounced correctly, just think about it in your life. Aren't you being affected if your name is not being pronounced correctly? I feel like if you don't take the time to really, like, I keep saying like, and I don't want to keep saying like, if you don't take the one moment to pronounce my name or to attempt to pronounce my name correctly, doesn't matter how wonderful the rest of the thing is going to go with the person. I just keep thinking to the beginning. So he does that beautifully, makes the jurors, the audience, as I call them, makes everybody else in the court relate to those people so much more because he brings that personal element into his closing. He is the human being, not just the lawyer doing what he has to do, which is the closing argument.
On May 24th, 2019, murdering his wife. How else could he have had her bloody bra, her bloody shirt, blood all over the bags, his DNA in a glove found inside the trash? How? And so when the defense suggests that to you, I suggest that's not reasonable. And so once you conclude that Mr. Doulos is responsible for the death of his wife, you then go to the next questions, which are, is this defendant legally responsible for her death? Is this defendant legally responsible for conspiring to tamper with evidence, for acting as an accessory to tamper with evidence? Was the defendant motivated to harm Jennifer Doulos?
One of the things the prosecution had to prove was that Jennifer Doulos, the mother of those beautiful children we were talking about in the beginning, who's gone missing, her body has not been found. They had to prove that Jennifer Doulos is not just missing, but she is dead. If they were not able to prove that she was dead, there would be no sense to convict Michelle Troconis, which is the one that's on trial right now, the mistress, in conspiring to kill Jennifer Doulos. So they also had to prove that Jennifer Doulos is not only missing the way the defense would like you to believe. She's gone just because her body was not found. It doesn't mean that she's gone girl, the way that at some point a couple of years ago when the husband that he's talking about, Doulos Fotis, who happens to be a Greek tragedy, my relationship with going back to Greece now so much more often than I used to because my parents lived there for this period of time. So he not only had to prove that she conspired in this murder of Jennifer Doulos with her then boyfriend, tampered with evidence, and all of the other things that we're going to talk about, that we're going to hear. They also had to prove that Jennifer Doulos is no longer She's not just missing. She's not just gone girl, the way that the defense attorney of the then Doulos Fotis wanted us to believe that she had a tendency. She did it before she was married, where she left and she didn't come back for I don't know how many years from New York, where she used to live. She moved to Aspen, blah, 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 to create reasonable doubt. So that's what he's talking about. He does it in such a way, not even spoon feeding it to the jurors. He's not saying, do you understand? Are you able to understand what I'm saying? How could this be? How could that not be? He's talking to them as if they are smart enough to understand and read between the lines. The subtext that's underneath of everything that he's saying, he leaves it up to the jurors to make up their minds. He's not feeding them, which I felt the defense for Michelle Troconis was doing. He was assuming that the audience need to be spoon fed. There's the difference between the prosecution and the defense attorney, in my opinion.
This defendant hated Jennifer Doulos. She referred to her as a bitch who should be buried next to the dog. Now, I'm just going to say this because we're going to talk about Mr. Gumiani in a few moments. The defense is trying to have it both ways. Disbelieve Mr. Gumiani about that, but believe him about the remark the following week. We'll talk about that. She had animus towards Jennifer Doulos. Even in her interviews, you heard it. And by the way, you're going to have the interviews, so you don't have to take my word for it. She referred to Jennifer Doulos as a manipulator. She said, you people are toxic, referring to Fotis Doulos and Jennifer Doulos. She said that since she moved to Connecticut, it had been 2 years of torture. She even admitted, if you caught it, that she demanded that Fotis Doulos go to therapy with her because of Jennifer Doulos. Everything was not okay.
The fact that he's going back over the harsh words that were spoken about Jennifer Doulos, the reason that you're going to bring and repeat some of the text and some of the lines, which will viscerally give something to the jurors to take with them, not just mentally, they will feel it in their bones, in their body, with their sensory apparatus. He doesn't just say, oh, this defendant, Michelle Troconis, called Jennifer Doulos a bad name. No, he goes and he relates exactly what was said. She called her a bitch. And she said that she would be better off buried with the dog. She called her a bitch and she would be better off buried with the dog. Those are harsh words. Those are very harsh words. She called her a manipulative woman. She even, he says, if you caught it, because I know you're smart audience, I know you're smart jurors, if you caught it, she even said that it has been a toxic relationship between Jennifer Doulos and Fotis Doulos. The defendant wanted Doulos to go into therapy, could not take that relationship. She could not stay in that toxic environment. It had been a period of utter negativity, nightmare. All of these powerful words are being emphasized by this gentleman over here, by the prosecution, because he knows it will pull at the strings of the hearts of the jurors. It will go beyond their mental understanding. It will go beyond them understanding it mentally. It will trigger in them something. It would be as if the jurors would feel in the moment what it would be like for any of them or for any of their mothers to be called a bitch that should be buried with the dog. If you think of your loved one gone missing, and then if you think that somebody said about your loved one, that bitch, she's a manipulator, she should have been buried with the dog, how would you feel about it? Well, he said that because he wants the jurors to feel that viscerally, to feel it, like I said, with their whole being, not just to mentally understand it. Smart.
And when the defense gets up here and they say to you, well, the report, everything was going so well, there was no motive, Fotis didn't have a motive, Michelle didn't have a motive. Think about what she actually said about that report for a second.
Another thing that he did here, which was really, really wonderful, and I tell my acting students and my actors, and I call them mine, they're not mine, but I tell them to do that all the time. If I'm describing another character, if I'm talking about something having to do with a script and I'm playing my own role, but then I'm going to describe what another character did, I always encourage them to go and try to put themselves in the shoes of the other character and try to come up with an expression that's full, with an expression that's not just from the neck up in saying and relating what the lines of the other character were, but also to try to bring in their demeanor, their comportment, their behavior. So I always say to them, try to get into the shoes of the other character. Try to put yourself in the way that the other character expresses himself or herself. And he does just that. He talks about the defense, how they're trying to make the jurors believe this and that. And then he goes to impersonate him, kind of. He says this, the defense says that, the defense would like you to believe this. So he takes on the part of the defense, not only speaks about the defense and remains in his role. He goes into the role of the defense by using his whole instrument, his whole body, whole instrument, which is the physicality, mental, the heart, the soul, the emotions, the sensory of the other character. That's the instrument of the actor. He does that. He goes into the expressions like this, That's a powerful moment too.
Jennifer is trying to manipulate you, Fotis. Stick with the courts. She has borderline personality disorder. So even after the report came out, this defendant didn't buy it. This defendant didn't think everything was going to be okay. This defendant needed to go to therapy to see if Jennifer Dulos being in her life was going to impact her future.
My nose is itching right now. They say in Romania, when nose is itching, that is good news, or I'm getting money or something. I hope I'm getting money. I don't know if I am, but that's what they say about nose itching. I might be getting money. I don't know. There's a saying, but I don't know what it is. Another thing that was really cool that he did, which is again an acting tool that only few actors know how to use it, because there's only few great actors out there. I don't understand why. There's so much evidence of how great acting is so important. It can move people into becoming better people. It can move people into feeling things that they've never felt because they're not actors. It can give people so much hope. What he did, he not only talked about the defendant, but he turned, pointed, pointed pointed, pointed. This defendant, not another defendant, even though there's not any other defendant in the courtroom, there's only Michelle Troconis, but he pointed to her because it's more specific. If you're making sure that the jurors remember this defendant here, I tell everybody not to point as actors with one finger, but to use the entire hand. It's even more powerful. This defendant, not any defendant. You might know that she's in the court, but I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the detailed reminder that it's this defendant.
That is completely contrary to the evidence. And I also just want to say this, and I don't quite know where this fits in. That's for you guys as the fact finders to decide. There's something unsettling.
Another brilliant move. I don't know so much. I'm not as smart as you are. This is the subtext. I'm not as smart as you are. I don't know where this fits in. You guys are smart. So this is your responsibility to move on and to take this decision, because I trust you probably smarter than I am. When you're saying that to another person, even in your everyday life, think how much confidence you give those people. You give them the confidence to be able to go then and make the decision, deliberate and take their time and really, really feel like they have a huge responsibility. You're giving them that reassurance. You're giving them the permission to be reminded they are smart enough to make a decision that is going to be the correct decision. You might be smarter than me because I don't know so much about how this fits in, but I know you will. Bravissimo, bravissimo, sir.
About the defendant and Mr. Dulos fooling around on the passenger side of that Tacoma on May 24th, 2019. And you'll recall that from the third interview. And where that fits into all this, I'm going to leave it up to you to decide.
Giving such an intimate detail and reminding them about what Michelle Troconis, the defendant, revealed in one of the interviews. I think she gave 3 interviews. They were all different because she was changing her alibi. At first, she was trying to say that she saw Fotis Dulos because she was trying to protect them. The more that she found out the evidence was there, to go against Fotis Dulos. The police did such an impeccable job in finding those videos where Fotis Dulos with Michelle in the car were getting rid of evidence in trash bags. In one of them, Michelle Troconis even opens the door for Fotis Dulos at the same time to throw these license plates from a car that he had played with and readjusted, changed the numbers and made into letters to not have been found from what the prosecution was saying. Michelle opens the door at the same time and she leans out of the car exactly the same time that Fotis walks from the back of the truck after he drops bags of evidence into a trash along the streets of Connecticut and drops those license plates that were played with and changed. What would be the reason? She wants to say that she had no idea. She was just in the car and she was on her phone. She has no idea what her boyfriend was doing, stopping and throwing trash out on the road. That is like such a crazy thing. Imagine yourself with a boyfriend. Imagine yourself with a friend in a car, and the friend stops every, I don't know how many meters, and he just drags black garbage bags and puts them into the trash. No matter how much you're on the phone, you're seeing that he's stopping. You're seeing what's happening. Aren't you going to ask, what the hell are you doing? She claims that when she opened the door from the car to lean out of the car, that's how she was seen by the detectives, that she was with him. She was actually driving along with him. It's not like she has no idea of what was happening because she was not near Fotis Dulos. She says that she leaned out of the car because she had chewing gum on her head. So she was trying to wipe the chewing gum on the side street. Why would anybody try to wipe chewing gum or the stickiness on a dirty street cement outside? I doesn't make any sense. Michelle Troconis, in one of her interviews, says that she made love or they were fooling around on the passenger seat of the car where it's supposedly known that Fotis Dulos might have taken the body of his wife, Jennifer Dulos. That says something. He doesn't have to give them an answer. He doesn't have to say what he believes of it. He lets them come up with a conclusion and have that play in their head. Everybody will have a different understanding of that kind of disgusting happening experience to have. How can you make love on the seat that can also be associated with the carrying of the body of this mother whom you hated and you called manipulator, you called a bitch that should be buried with a dog? That's kind of describing this character or characterless of Michelle Troconis, who's on trial here.
In this case, repeatedly lied to investigators. What does that say about her culpability? What does that say about what she knew in advance? What does that say about what she knew was going to happen to Jennifer Dulos and what she knew they did after the fact? So let's run through some of the things the defendant said to investigators. I showered with Fotis Dulos on May 24th, 2019. This is what she told investigators about where Fotis Dulos was on the morning of May 24th, 2019. I saw Fotis talking to Kent in the office. All these details. He's talking to Kent at the table in the office. I grabbed my computer. You know he's in New Canaan murdering his wife. You know that because of all the evidence, the DNA evidence, the trash in Hartford. So what is she talking about? I didn't see Fotis's phone in the morning on the 24th.
This is what I was saying about her changing her alibi, changing and lying about what her whereabouts were. In the beginning, she says, yes, Fotis was at home. I remember he was there. And she even goes like this. We do that as people from other countries, I think. And I don't know if I'm saying this in a good way because I don't want people to get offended. But I think we're very much more animated. Not that we're much more animated. Some people, let's just forget what I said. Some people are much more animated. She's animated, especially for people who don't have English as their first language. We tend to use our bodies more because we feel that we need the additional expression to be able to be understood, since it's not easy for us to speak English. So the first interview, she was saying, yes, I remember Fotis. And she's almost like going back and recreating in her mind where she saw Fotis. So she's pointing with her hand. I saw Fotis. He was there with Kent, the lawyer, the other guy who supposedly was part of the whole conspiracy. I don't know much about him yet. And then she says, I wake up, I get in the shower, I don't wash my hair, which I can relate to. So she's very detailed about these things. I don't wash my hair all the time. I don't need to. It takes a long time to dry. I'm lazy. I wash from my neck down. I relate to that. If I were a juror, I relate to that. How does she have all these details? But then when it comes to the important stuff that she was asked about, she doesn't remember. Or then the second interview, she says, well, no, I remembered all those details and I even pointed them to you. I didn't see the phone of Otis, but then I saw the phone. It doesn't make sense because she seems to be so detailed in her remembrance of all of things. But then she says, I didn't remember correctly, or you, the detectives, as her defense attorney is trying to prove in this case, playing with her memory. They were feeding the wrong information, as they have the right to do, about the case. So she was confused about what they were saying, and that's why her stories were not staying the same, and they kept changing and changing. And he says, lying, 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 and he repeats, lied again, she lied again, she lied again. The repetition exercise of actors.
She told investigators she didn't see the phone. She told investigators she saw Fotis in the shower. She told investigators she saw Fotis talking to Kent McGuinnness until she didn't. Wait, I actually didn't see him. Didn't see him. As the investigators get more evidence and she sits down for a third and final interview. Now all of a sudden she didn't see him. Wait, I actually did see his phone. And incidentally, I just happened to answer the one phone call that he had in his timeline, the phone call that he set up the night before. Now, I am just going to say this. Her lies were so profound that the defense brought in two experts to try to explain them away to you. What I suggest to you about those experts is, number one, Dr. Loftus couldn't point to a single thing, not one thing in this record that the police officers fed her. Not one. So when the defense attorney gets up and says, you'll see in the report authority figures, I asked her on cross-examination, did the officer suggest that? I don't recall. Did the officer suggest that? No. Not one thing. And it's interesting too. We talk about language proficiency. We talk about why she may have said the things that she said. I'm going to tell you exactly why, members of the jury, you should reject that. If that's really the case, she has memory lapses. She has false implanted memories. She doesn't speak the language. If that's really what's going on, why is she so good on details that don't matter and so bad on details that incriminate her? Why? How does she know she bought parsley at Stop and Shop? She even told the police, if you'll recall, and you watched the interview, that when she went up to Starbucks, she tried to order a chocolate croissant and they were out. That's the kind of detail that she provided. And yet when it comes to things that incriminate her, language gap.
Specificity is universal in acting. Specificity is universal in life. He goes back to remember himself and to remind the jurors about the fact that she even remember going to the Starbucks with her then boyfriend. She wanted the chocolate croissant, but they couldn't have the chocolate croissant, so they had to get something else. And she got a sandwich, and he ate the sandwich because she didn't like it. Or she remembers that she bought parsley. If you are focusing sensorially as an actor on the details, if you do the investigative work as an actor with your character, on the character, the role that you're playing, and you're bringing out the specific details of that character, that's what will become great acting. That's what will become imprinted in the mind of the people watching you, of the jurors in this case, of the audiences in the case of actors. Parsley, just the parsley. She remembers parsley. She remembers croissant. She remembers there wasn't chocolate croissant. Chocolate even croissant, not just a croissant, because a croissant could have been general. It's a chocolate. So you already reveal so much more about who she is as a person. She likes chocolate, croissant. That already reveals something else about the defendant. That might not be of such importance, but it adds to the importance of the whole story. But then he says, the defense is trying to make you believe that her English is not good. She doesn't understand, even though she was speaking the same way that I do with a different accent, because she's, I believe, from Venezuela. I'm Romanian. I'm not going to need a translator to translate for me. God forbid. I hope I'm not in a situation like she is with so many consequences. Just because I don't speak English well, it doesn't mean that I need somebody to translate. Of course, I understand what's going on. Of course, I understand. The defense in her case, they were trying to say that her language is what made her make so many lies to the detectives over the 3 interviews. It's because of her language. She didn't understand, which he's bringing up to the jurors to not let them be fooled by this stupidity the defense is trying to bring in. She didn't have a translator her life while she was living and doing other things before she became involved, conspired to murder and hide evidence and tamper with evidence, all of the things that are being revealed about her in this case. No, she's a liar. She's lying. It has nothing to do with all the things the defense was telling you about. Take her as a liar.
Here's the thing about the lies also. She doubled down on it, didn't she? When Detective Clabby told her during that first interview that Fotis Dulos had murdered his wife, after that, she went back to, I saw him in the house. She doubled down on these lies. In her second interview, she said she never read Fotis Dulos' timeline. That's interesting, isn't it? Because his timeline, you'll recall, notes the call from Greece, notes the call from Andreas, because it was designed to be an alibi for him, just like she was. And as you know, that phone call was arranged the night before.
The one thing that I wanted to make a little bit of a comment about was the prosecutor. I do not think that it's necessary for him to touch his nose. Those were the only moments that I would have something to say if he was an actor and I was working with him. Then I would tell him to watch why he's making that touch to the nose. When you do something that's physical as an actor on stage and you do it more than once or twice, then it becomes something that's distracting. The audience will feel something where they will pull back from believing what you have to say because they will be annoyed by it, the same way that I would be annoyed if somebody does it while talking to me. That repetitive kind of thing. So the repetitive this, when you're actually making a factual statement, that's very, very powerful. But then when you have a gesture, it's almost like a mechanical nervousness that you do without knowing. You can make that, but you have to become aware of it as an actor. So if you're doing it as an actor knowingly, rather than just do it without any kind of justification, then it becomes very annoying to the audience. It's the same thing if I were to place an imaginary cup on the table, let's just say, while I'm doing a scene, there's no cup, but there's an imaginary cup, and I place it right here. Then after 5 minutes, I come back as a character, and I don't remember that the imaginary cup was here. I sit on that table. The audience will retract. They will feel cheated out of that experience that I created for them in the first place with the imaginary cup being there. And they will feel like I'm cheating them because now I'm sitting on the place that's empty, but in their mind, I was able to make them see that there is a imaginary cup, so they will feel cheated out of the experience. So something with the nose, I don't know why he was doing that, to be honest. Maybe he was having doubts, but I don't think, it doesn't seem like he was having doubts. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Maybe it's just a habitual gesture. I have mine where I keep touching my hair and I put it behind my ear and stuff like that. The phone call that he talks about that was pre-planned by Doulos to have a phone call to enrich his alibi that he had nothing to do with the killing of his wife, but that he was home. So he left the cell phone at home, and Michelle answered the one phone call done from before for her to answer from a friend overseas from Greece, from Andreas. And they say the phone call came from Andreas. And this is usually what I have a conversation with my actors that I work in Greece, because I think when you call somebody directly by their name and their name is Andreas, that's the name. But when you address them directly, you say Andrea. Then when you say the phone call came from a person, Andreas. I don't know. I'm always having that misunderstanding, and I'm always trying to ask my sister, when is Andrea and when do you put the S at the end? I don't know. But that kind of stuck out to me. So do you see how we all have kind of our reactive emotions to what somebody is saying due to our life experiences and background and our individuality and our understanding of little things. So that's why specific things, details are so important. And he brought that up. He mentioned those specific details that she remembers, as to say, it's not that she's not lying and her mind was getting confused by the detectives' information they were giving her. No, she's very detailed. She's very specific in remembering what doesn't need to be remembered, trivial things. But when it comes to the important things, she doesn't remember, or she changes them because her memory is not as clear. Makes no sense.
The defendant was undoubtedly part of this plan to kill Jennifer Dulos. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The cops asked her, why wasn't Hartford in your timeline? Oh, I was going to write that, but I got interrupted. Isn't that a coincidence? Isn't that convenient? Speaking of that, you heard the defense talk about Kent McGuinnness. The evidence is that when that phone call came in, what did Kent McGuinnness say to the defendant in her own words? Does anyone remember? Is this the call? The call. Isn't that strange? Freudian slip. You only have to find that the defendant conspired with one other person to find her guilty of conspiracy to commit murder.
Isn't that funny? The call. She forgot about the call. Freudian slip. Why was it the call? Why wasn't it a call? It was the call because there was something that was so much more having to do with the disappearance, with the death of Jennifer Dulos. The alibi that he was talking about is the one that Michelle Troconis and Fotis Dulos, before he unalived himself, before he decided to go on the other side, he left a letter to say, I cannot take any more of this. The fact that I am considered to be guilty, I cannot take another 5 minutes of this. I am not. I cannot take the fact that people think that I had something to do with it. And by the way, Michelle Troconis had nothing to do with it. And my friend, the lawyer, had nothing to do with it. Well, how would you know they had nothing to do with it if you had nothing to do with it? I mean, how would you know? Maybe they had something to do with it and you don't know they had something to do with it. The fact that they both had an alibi, which Michelle Troconis and the defense attorney, her defense attorney, says she was instructed, it was suggested by her lawyer at that time to write an alibi, to write detail about what she and Fotis Dulos were doing on the days of the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos. They might be interrogated by the police, so they want to make sure that they don't forget anything. But the most important thing, going back to what he was saying, which she didn't write in that alibi, which she was trying to form for herself and for Dulos, both of them together, she didn't write about the disposing of the evidence that the detectives, due to their impeccable work, were able to find. Forget to write about the ride and the disposal of the bloody clothes and bloody bra of Jennifer Dulos. The day I was watching TV and I saw the prosecution present those items in evidence and the blouse was taken out, and it was such a difficult thing to watch. And it was cut in the front, filled with blood. But then when the bra was taken out, it's almost like such an intimate object for actors. That's an intimate, significant object that they would work with because it has so much emotion around it. I mean, the fact that you're revealing this woman who's no longer the mother of these amazing children, a wonderful human being, the way that she was described by so many friends and people during this trial, to see the bra, which is such an intimate object, almost like it gives you the size of what she was. It's so revealing and it will move anybody. Make those associations in your head when looking at it and say, oh, she was, this size with the bra and that's cut in the middle. You can only imagine last minutes of what might have been for her. It's just so unbearable to watch, monstrous that people are capable of doing that. It's just, significant object, and the way that he and his colleague, the other prosecutor, was able to take out those bloody items was such revelatory. That probably was like the culmination. That was probably the highest point of the whole arc of their presentation in this case. It's just horrible, horrible, but yet very, very difficult not to take into consideration and not to allow yourself to become personally involved in this. I'm speaking of the jurors, Ugh.
And it's obvious here that she conspired with Mr. Dulos. She was part of his alibi while he was in New Canaan murdering his wife. In the second interview, she told investigators that Mr. Dulos hadn't told her what to write in her timeline. But by the time we get to the third interview, he told her. So you think about that.
Lies.
Why is someone who is innocent lying so much? That's a question for you to answer.
As detectives were bringing more evidence against her, she had to change her story accordingly. It's in a character. I mean, if you're watching a character on stage and they have 3 interviews and every interview is going to be different, tragedy. I wish, again, I was able to say that it was a fictional story.
Think about 80 Mountain Spring Road and the timing of everything. Why would Mr. Dulos, and again, the evidence is overwhelming that he murdered his wife. So why would Mr. Dulos invite her to 80 Mountain Spring Road to clean the house while he's cleaning the Tacoma that was involved in this crime, unless she was involved? Why would she bring cleaning supplies? Think about it for 1 second. I want you to just think about that. POTUS Doulos' head. While I clean blood out of a Tacoma from my estranged wife's death, can you clean the house? Is that reasonable? To say nothing of the fact that she completely omitted the Tacoma from her first two interviews. Why was that? Why wasn't the Tacoma mentioned? Why wasn't that brown stained paper towel mentioned during the first two interviews? Also, think about how the defendant described going to 80 Mountain Spring Road. She says that initially, POTUS Doulos called her to bring cleaning supplies. She kind of is distancing herself from what was going on down there. But you know that they actually went together. And it's not until she's pressed that she admits that they went together. And it's corroborated by the surveillance footage.
If my husband calls me right now and he's cleaning a car, he's asking me to go to the same location and bring cleaning supplies, I wouldn't ask what this was about. I can just imagine him, me coming back from Greece, having visited my parents and being able to spend some time with my family there, having come home and, oh, I would notice something that's weird about the sofa in the living room, and he'd be cleaning it and he would say, can you go downstairs and buy some more supplies? What happened during the time I wasn't here? Oh, nothing, but there's like coffee like stains on it. I just need you to buy more supplies and clean it up. Oh yeah, not a problem. I'm not going to ask any questions. I mean, at first she said, well, I went there because he asked me to clean this new house. POTUS Doulos had a construction company where he was building these huge mega villas and houses all over Connecticut. That also was not spoken about so much during the trial, but that was also provided, that financial status for him to be able to have such a company was all provided by Jennifer Doulos's parents, father, who's passed since then. Jennifer Doulos comes from a well-to-do family. Very well-to-do family. As we would say in Romanian, I would say in Romanian, I shouldn't think of all the people, but as I would say in Romanian, when POTUS Doulos married Jennifer Doulos, Jennifer Farber, Doulos after his last name, we say in Romanian, i-a pus Dumnezeu mâna în cap. God has put his hand on his head. That's how lucky he was, because he was able to do what he loved to do. He was able to do his passion, which was water skiing, competitive sport in water skiing, take his children skiing to all the privileged, beautiful places, travel and have the lifestyle of the rich and famous, almost due to Jennifer Doulos and her father and her parents, because she comes from a well-off family. Even though she was the most humble person from all the conversations and all the descriptions of her really good friends who have been along during this horrible trial to be her voice, since she doesn't have a voice anymore. So he had so much to lose in the divorce, not only the custody of the children, but in losing the custody of the children, he was only getting with supervised visitations. He was also losing the money that would come with the children. If Jennifer Doulos was gone and he could live with Michelle Troconis, okay, great. But Jennifer Doulos's money and her side of the family's money would have to be returned, which he then said that it was never the fact that he needed to return to the mother of Jennifer Doulos $2 million that was given to him with the understanding that it would be returned. He said, no, it was given to me as a present. So there was a lot of events that were happening around him, losing not just the children and the custody, but losing everything that he knew around him, his lifestyle and everything.
So you say, well, Attorney McGuinnness, that was just an innocent memory lapse, no harm, no foul. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that. Why would the defendant go to 80 Mountain when you know that this cleanup is going on? Think about what the defendant brought to 80 Mountain and what was later found in the trash. But they were asking her what the color of the sponge was, and she said yellow and green. What color sponge was found in the trash in Hartford with Jennifer Doulos's blood and DNA on it? What type of bags were found in Hartford with Jennifer Doulos's blood and DNA in them, with Jennifer Doulos's bloody bra and shirt in them? Think about the fires. 3 separate fires on the afternoon of May 24th, 2019. None of those made the timeline. Just like Hartford didn't make the timeline. Just like the Keys didn't make the timeline. Who's lighting a fire on Memorial Day weekend? Better question. Who's lighting 3 fires on the Friday before Memorial Day weekend on a day like that? The fact is that she lit 3 separate fires at a time, and you know with certainty that the cleanup of Jennifer Doulos's murder is going on. And the phone data shows that she was at the house by herself. Her admissions show that she was at the house by herself lighting those fires. The surveillance shows her going back and forth repeatedly, 5 minutes at a time, 9 minutes at a time, fire, fire. She's not involved?
Fire, fire, 5 minutes at a time, fire, fire. She would light these fires in May, and there was another witness from the defense. It was a friend of hers from Venezuela, I believe, and she came on. The defense was trying to kind of give an explanation to why she was lighting all these fires during May, the day of the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos. The friend revealed that she liked to light fires because for atmosphere, it's not necessary you light fires in fireplace for the heat. No, you have to light sometimes because of atmosphere. It doesn't matter what an atmosphere you want to create with a fireplace. I understand that, but if it's already nice outside, if it's hot outside, you can't enjoy the atmosphere if you're going to be heating yourself too much because the weather is nice outside. Why would you do 3 different fires on the day of the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos? Is there a coincidence? He's going to get into that. Talk about the repetition exercise. Fire, fire, fire. Not just one fire. Fire, fire, fire. But she forgot to put that on her alibi list, together with the fact that she was in the same car disposing evidence of bloody clothes. She forgot to put that. She forgot to put the fact that she had the key to the car that was involved in the moving of Jennifer Dulos while she was cleaning the rest of the evidence and she was burning everything in the fire. Fire, fire, fire.
Everything that Mr. Gumieni said to you, corroborated by video surveillance, the infotainment system, the gas receipt. There's even surveillance footage of him leaving with the dirt bike in the back of his vehicle. You guys will recall that. And by the way, if you're going to have the temerity in closing argument to accuse someone of being involved in a murder, at least have the brass to ask them when they're here on cross-examination. Objection, Your Honor.
Well, at this point, court can appreciate this argument.
I love this, Judge.
Ad hominem attacks should not be considered by the jury. Neither should they continue.
Mr. Gumieni withstood an entire day of cross-examination, an entire day of cross-examination, and he stood up to it.
Prosecutor, what he did now was he actually took a risk when he brought in the witness, Pavel Gumieni, who was one of the workers for Fotis Doulos. The prosecution believes that Fotis Doulos was trying to frame him, Pavel, for the murder of Jennifer Doulos because of the resemblance in their physicality. Fotis Doulos even cut his hair short in order to resemble the haircut of Pavel, to say that he was the one. He was the one that might have had something to do with Jennifer Doulos' murder. So this prosecutor is saying, if you have the audacity to say that, to even raise that up, you saw the judge had to intervene. He took a risk, which for actors, a risk-taking, not knowing where it's going to take you, if you're going to lose or if you're going to win, is always powerful and such a active choice to make. It's very engaging for the audience. It's very engaging to the jurors to see that this prosecutor is not afraid. He's unafraid. He stands by what he believes, that the jurors will believe his side of presentation. He was looking at the clock on the wall, so he doesn't have a lot to go. When you're seeing somebody looking up at the clock, make sure that you have a clock to watch. As an actor, don't just pretend that you're looking at your clock, because it's the same as with a cup. If you're not looking at something, the audience is going to see that you're not looking at something.
We've met our burden of proof in this case. I want to show you, I have 2 minutes left here, the timelines. One last time. They have been referred to as timelines, but they were really just a script, weren't they? And maybe some of you remember from English class in high school, every script has 3 acts, doesn't it? The first act was the premeditation and killing of Jennifer Dulos. The second act was the cover-up through the destruction of evidence and the defendant's lies. And now we've reached the third act, except she doesn't get to write it. You do. You write the third act of this script with your verdict. What's the ending going to be? Thank you.
Bravo, Sir Sean McGuinnness. And I'm sorry I didn't know your name for the duration of this episode because I talk about the importance of saying somebody's name, but at least I didn't butcher it. I did allow myself to say that I don't know his name, and then I found it. So thank you. Bravo. extraordinary performance in your closing. This on top of the brilliant work of the detectives, the prosecutors in proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt. This closing argument by this extraordinary lawyer, storyteller, sealed the case. And that's why she got the guilty verdict. A tragedy. I feel so bad that, again, this is not a fictional scenario that we're talking about. I wish it were. So thank you so much for allowing me to attempt to do this interpretation from an acting perspective on a trial. Please let me know what you think. Do subscribe if you're kind enough to share it, get more people to my channel. I thank you so much. Thank you. Kisses, kisses, kisses.